Hi, everyone. We're Group 1, and we're conducting a curriculum analysis for social justice and equity using a seventh grade English language arts curriculum and the CRE ELA curriculum scorecard. To begin this curriculum analysis for social justice and equity, we begin by reviewing how curriculum is reviewed and revised in Vineland Public Schools. Curriculum review and revision follows a 5-year quality assurance cycle. During the cycle, appointed committee members study each curriculum area, review and research the most successful programs nationwide, and recommend changes to assure that the curriculum meets the needs of students and society. Curriculum members include teachers, administrators, as well as parents and community representatives. This aligns with Sorensen et al. 2011 and PSEL Standard 4 by collaborating with families and stakeholders who represent diverse community interests. The Office of Curriculum Instruction webpage details that the cycle for review and revision includes 5 stages: review, development, pilot, implementation, and evaluation. To begin this curriculum analysis for social justice and equity, we begin by reviewing how curriculum is reviewed and revised in Vineland Public Schools. Curriculum review and revision follows a 5-year quality assurance cycle. During the cycle, appointed committee members study each curriculum area, review and research the most successful programs nationwide, and recommend changes to assure that the curriculum meets the needs of students and society. Curriculum members include teachers, administrators, as well as parents and community representatives. This aligns with Sorensen et al. 2011 and PSEL Standard 4 by collaborating with families and stakeholders who represent diverse community interests. The Office of Curriculum Instruction webpage details that the cycle for review and revision includes 5 stages: review, development, pilot, implementation, and evaluation.
Culturally responsive education, or CRE, which is closely related to the terms culturally relevant and culturally sustaining education, is the combination of teaching, pedagogy, curriculum, theories, attitudes, practices, and instructional materials that center students' cultural identities and context throughout educational systems. Some of the key principles of culturally responsive education include validating students' experiences and values, disrupting power dynamics that privilege dominant groups, and empowering students. Rigorous evaluation and studies have shown that culturally responsive curricula increase student academic engagement, attendance, grade point averages, graduation rates, civic engagement, positive racial self-images, and self-definition. The CRE ELA Curriculum Scorecard is a tool created by NYU Metro Center's Center for Research on Equity and the Transformation of Schools to evaluate and audit English language arts curriculum through an equity and a culturally responsive lens. It's designed to help school districts, administrators, and educators examine whether a curriculum represents diverse identities and perspectives, race, culture, gender, language, ability, as well as centers student voice and lived experiences in the learning process, supports critical thinking about power, equity, and justice, provides rigorous standards-aligned instruction while being culturally and linguistically responsive. The scorecard uses a rubric-style framework, rating curriculum materials across domains such as representation. Do students see themselves and others reflected in authentic, non-stereotypical ways? Social justice. Does the curriculum encourage analysis of inequities and foster civic engagement? Teacher supports. Are educators provided with tools and guidance for equitable implementation? Academic rigor and alignment. Is the content aligned to standards and intellectually challenging? Student agency. Does the curriculum promote inquiry, collaboration, and student-led learning? This tool was designed to help parents, teachers, students, and community members determine the extent to which their school's English language arts curriculum are or are not culturally responsive. Over the next few slides, you will see a blank scorecard. This portion of the scorecard is the first part of the representation domain. The representation section helps you determine the extent to which students in your school are reflected in the curriculum and the extent to which they are being exposed to a diverse group of authors, characters, identities, and cultures. Representation can sometimes just be a token gesture, putting a non-white or female character in the place of a white male character. This numerical representation, coupled with deeper indicators of representation, provide the first first layer of CRE analysis. Here you could see the character and the author tally. This section of the scorecard captures the representation of characters from specific cultures. To obtain a score, you use the tally to count the symbolic representation of characters and authors by race, gender, and ability. You refer to this tally to help you determine your level of satisfaction in the representation section of the scorecard. We will count the types of people in each image by race, gender, and ability to assess the frequency of representation. This shows the second part of the representation domain, with the focus being on the diversity of characters and the accurate portrayals. The diversity of characters section looks at how diverse people and cultures are portrayed in the curriculum, specifically the extent to which people of different cultures, skin tones, abilities, etc. are central to a story. The accurate portrayal section looks at the extent to which characters accurately reflect the histories and experiences of their cultures. Culturally responsive curriculum will position characters as multidimensional and portray characters in a non-stereotypical way. The scores are tallied up or averaged if working on a team, and a total score is produced. The social justice section is divided into 3 categories, each of which contribute to understanding the opportunities that curricula provide for cultural responsiveness. The first is decolonization, power, and privilege. This section focuses on understanding relationships among people, worldviews, resources, ideas, and power dynamics. Historically, public schools' curriculum reflect Eurocentric ideas and culture, while the contribution and philosophies of other groups were excluded, minimized, misrepresented, or regulated to a small portion of the curriculum. A culturally responsive curriculum centers sources of knowledge, experiences, and stories of diverse groups of people. Next is the centering multiple perspectives section. Centering multiple perspectives means affirming, valuing, and sustaining the worldviews of historically underrepresented people as the central focus in educational materials or curriculum. Last is the connect learning to real life and action section. One of the most essential components of CRE is connecting or relating learning to students' real-life experiences, communities, and cultures. Culturally responsive curriculum should encourage students to connect to experiences beyond their own, examine their own perspective and privilege, and develop a critical consciousness about systems of oppression in order to take action against them. Again, just as in the previous section, the scores are tallied up or averaged if working on a team, and a total score is produced. This slide shows a blank scorecard for rating teacher materials. For this section, one must review all the teacher's materials for the curriculum that's selected. This may include a teacher's manual, as well as any teacher guidance within the individual units or lesson plans. Since many teachers do not receive training on culturally responsive teaching strategies, curriculum should provide teachers with guidance on how to approach, enhance, and customize lessons for their students' population.
Unit 1 focuses on the novel Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pied by Jordan Sonnenblick. This novel follows 13-year-old Stephen, a drummer living in New Jersey, through his experience with his brother being diagnosed with leukemia. In the book, the school community rallies around the family by organizing a spring concert benefit to help pay for medical bills. Stephen, the main character, has to choose between a drum solo and being with his ill brother. In the end, his brother enters remission, and Stephen emerges with a deeper empathy and more meaningful view on life and family. The essential question of this unit is, to what extent are individuals and their community responsible for their future? This unit addresses topics related to overcoming adversity and developing skills to address adjustment to conflict or change. Students also use Sonnenblick's writing to evaluate how personal experiences encourage and lend themselves to the writing process. The goal is to have students select and evaluate media or articles and compose a literary analysis of either following the writing process. Following the unit, students will demonstrate mastery of reading, writing, speaking, and listening and language standards. Being about music, the lessons in literary analysis are tied to technology and 21st century standards by incorporating multimedia tools like Spotify. Students evaluate articles related to Spotify and streaming platforms to create literary analysis of articles. To evaluate this unit based on representation of underrepresented perspectives and groups, categories are examined in terms of strengths and weaknesses. Strengths include connections to chronic illness and disability. This is shown through the character Jeffrey, Stephen's younger brother, having leukemia. His illness drives the plot, and the book portrays the emotional, financial, and social challenges of a family facing serious illness. Connections to socioeconomic status are portrayed through the family's financial struggles with medical bills. The main character, Stephen, becomes aware of financial strain due to medical treatment. While they aren't depicted as poor, the economic strain is a major theme of the novel. Weakness in representation of underrepresented perspectives is observed through connections to race and ethnicity due to the main characters and family being white middle class and living in a suburban area, gender due to supporting characters being female while main characters are predominantly male, and LGBTQ+, which is not present in the novel. It is significant to note that the novel is based in New Jersey, which adds to the connection and representation of Vineland Public School students. When evaluating from a social justice perspective, the book exposes readers to systems of oppression and disadvantage related to financial strain and chronic illness or disability. By depicting Jeffrey and his family's limitation due to his cancer, the novel shows how medical treatment can shape and impact what a family is capable of participating in during daily life. Oppression and disadvantage is also prevalent through the financial struggles the family faces due to medical treatment. This highlights inequalities within the healthcare system by demonstrating how different families are financially impacted by necessary medical treatments. The text in this unit does not include someone who would be considered a diverse author, and the novel's characters are already noted to be of white and middle-class suburban living. Resources are also primarily focused on literary analysis methods and character plot analysis, rather than on the sensitive topics presented within the novel. Only one resource addresses the 5 stages of grief with relation to the main character, Stephen. It appears that students are simply exposed to the material without real-world connections to the information being addressed within the curriculum and novel. The majority of the unit is focused on methods of literary analysis, without an opportunity to address the representation within the novel. Unit 2 focuses on the novel The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros and a variety of other informational texts focusing around the topic of culture. The novel is narrated by a young Latina girl growing up in a poor neighborhood of Chicago. Throughout the novel, she observes her community, family, and neighbors while struggling with poverty, sexism, cultural expectations, and her own desire for independence. While the main character dreams of leaving Mango Street and having a home of her own, she also feels tied to her community. By the end of the novel, she realizes she wants to leave in order to grow, but also return to give voice and support to those still marginalized. While reading the text assigned to this unit, students consider the essential question of how does culture shape the way we see the world, others, and ourselves? The goal is to have students work collaboratively to design and present a multicultural program. Students will demonstrate mastery of the reading, writing, speaking and listening, and language standards by the end of the unit. This unit centers around Latinx characters, cultures, communities, language, and lived experiences, with other diverse characters being introduced in supporting texts. This unit demonstrates strengths in its representation of diverse cultures and characters while disrupting the dominance of white middle-class narratives in novels. While the novel is representative of socioeconomic equalities and gender oppression, it is noted to also lean into their associated stereotypes to portray what are believed to be cultural norms in the Latinx community. 62.1% of the student body population in Vineland is reported to be Hispanic or Latino, which creates significant connection and relatable material for Vineland Public School students. When evaluating from a social justice perspective, this unit exposes students to systems of oppression and disadvantage related to gender roles, class struggles, and inequities related to housing, racism, cultural language, and immigration. With implicit themes of oppression and disadvantage throughout the novel, teachers may be required to provide support and guidance as the themes are exposed at this grade level. This is especially impactful as some of the themes may directly relate to the lives of students within their classrooms. In evaluating Unit 2's teacher materials, it is clear that all texts include diverse authors and demonstrate strength in highlighting diversity as a strength and asset. The unit plan does well in supporting teachers to be aware of bias and gaps between cultures. Materials and resources support teachers in engaging students in sensitive experiential learning activities through a wide array of additional resources provided for the unit. It is not explicitly stated that real-world connections are being made within the unit or if students are just exposed to it and then tasked with creating presentations rather than creating connections and applications. It's also unclear if there is an opportunity for personal or family involvement within the unit.
Unit 3 revolves around Rodman Philbrick's young adult novel, Freak the Mighty. This story is realistic fiction, though it has many elements of fantasy. Philbrick's novel is told through the perspective of Max, who, through the life and death of his friend Kevin, learns to respect his own intelligence and endure his own frightening heritage. The writing focus for this unit is both a narrative and a persuasive. Students will write a personal narrative using one of their favorite photographs to supply the details. This unit will also include short informational texts that center on the topic of ability grouping in schools. Students will analyze articles for and against the topic, write a persuasive essay, and hold a debate on the issue. Overall, students will use these resources to recognize the worth in all and see how people are born with inherent worth regardless of imperfections or faults that they may have, that everyone brings unique qualities and talents to various situations. This will be used to strengthen reading and writing skills learned throughout the year. Looking at Unit 3 and analyzing representation, the strengths of this unit is that it centers around characters who are marginalized in different ways. The main story, Freak the Mighty, focuses on two boys with marginalized identity. Max, who has a learning difference and low self-esteem, as well as Kevin, who has a physical disability called Morquio syndrome. Their friendship models interdependence and how strengths can complement weaknesses. This unit does a good job highlighting the strengths of those who are often overlooked, and it offers representation for students with disabilities. However, the limitations are that at times the main text does portray disabilities in a stereotypical way, such as the genius boy with the broken body, which highlights deficits rather than being fully affirming. While this unit represents students with disabilities, many of the additional texts used, such as King Arthur and its Knights of the Round Table, lack racial and cultural diversity. The characters represented in this unit are almost all white males, with the female characters being largely passive. Therefore, this unit leaves many students underrepresented, as well as the known authors were all white males. Looking at Unit 3 and analyzing social justice orientation, the strengths of this unit is that it raises questions about ableism and how we define intelligence, strength, and worth. Additional texts include King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table and informational texts about self-esteem and Morquio syndrome. This unit opens the door for discussion about bias, stereotypes, and bullying. Students are asked to write a persuasive essay and hold a debate about ability grouping, which provokes critical questions about the societal status quo and presents alternative points of view as equally worth considering. However, the limitations are that this unit does not connect personal struggles to larger systems of power, privilege, or inequality. As well, this unit does not focus on race, culture, language, or intersectionality. Looking at Unit 3 and analyzing teaching materials, the texts in this unit lack racial diversity in authors and characters, yet the stories represent characters with disabilities and center on their strengths. The unit focuses heavily on a person's worth, highlighting universal themes of friendship, identity, courage, and resilience. The enduring understanding is that every person is born with inherent worth, regardless of any imperfection or faults they may have. Everyone brings unique qualities and talents to various situations. As well, guidance is provided throughout this unit to make real-world connections and promote critical thinking. The assignments take into account different lived experiences among students. Teachers are guided to supplement and enhance the curriculum based on student interests and needs, like the option for assessment choice.
Our analysis of the 7th grade ELA curriculum using the CRE ELA scorecard begins by evaluating characters and authors within the curriculum. The top scorecard was completed to evaluate the diversity of characters within the curriculum. Within the completed scorecard, we see that there is an almost even distribution of male and female characters, with slightly more male characters represented. Additionally, the top scorecard evaluates characters by their race or background. Evaluation of the unit's characters show that the majority are Latinx or white, with other categories represented as Black, African, or people with disabilities. The bottom scorecard was completed to evaluate the diversity of authors within the curriculum. The results show an almost even split, with the largest category being unknown and male to female authors being split evenly. Results are similar when evaluating race and background of authors. The largest category is seen in Latinx authors, with white and racially ambiguous authors following behind. Overall, the two scorecards demonstrate equality between male and female authors and characters within the curriculum. The scorecards also show that the curriculum favors Latinx characters and authors with representation of white authors and characters following behind. Analysis continues using the scorecard for representation in the diversity of characters and accurate portrayals of characters. Average scores indicate that diversity of characters falls within the very satisfied range, with the entire domain showing average scores of +2. The accurate portrayals of diversity in culture and characters shows average scores falling within the very satisfied to not satisfied range. Areas of high satisfaction are shown within areas like problems faced by people of color or women that are not solved by intervention of a white character, and within diversity of characters being rooted in their own cultures and not ambiguous in cultural identity. Unclear areas indicated by a -1 include the depiction of transgender characters overall and social situations and problems not being seen as individual but rather within a societal context. The total representation score of 7 shows emerging awareness. This means the curriculum likely represents some groups in diverse and dynamic ways, but not all. Some characters are portrayed in culturally and historically accurate ways, while others are still depicted as stereotypes. There is likely little diversity among curriculum contributors, or that the curriculum contributors are tailoring the curriculum to a specific population within the student body. This slide represents the scorecard for social justice within the curriculum. Scores related to decolonization, power, and privilege show to be in the overall very satisfied range, with a majority of average scores being +2. An average score of 0 was provided to the communication of negativity or hostility towards people of marginalized groups. Centering multiple perspectives also shows to be within the very satisfied range, with average scores of +2, indicating that the curriculum does well with providing multiple points of view, with special attention being on marginalized groups. Scores related to connect learning to real life and action fall within the very satisfied to satisfied range, with the highest score being shown in the curriculum's ability to provide opportunities for students to connect learning to social, political, or environmental concerns that affect them in their lives. The total social justice score of 13 displays cultural responsiveness, meaning that the curriculum is likely humanizing, liberatory, and equity oriented. Instances of centering multiple perspectives are abundant throughout the curriculum. There are clear prompts, activities, and content that connect students' learning to real life issues and actions. There are many opportunities for teachers to engage in cultural responsiveness throughout this curriculum. This slide represents the scorecard for rating teacher materials within the curriculum. The score of 13 indicates that the materials are culturally responsive and there is an abundance of guidance on engaging cultural responsiveness meaningfully throughout the teaching approach, homework, lessons plans, etc. Culturally responsive guidance is clearly marked and presented as essential to effective teaching. Teachers are encouraged to consistently check their own biases and reflect on their practice. Strengths were indicated in being aware of biases and gaps in one's own culture and identity, as well as in guidance provided to engage students in culturally sensitive experiential learning activities. A slight weakness was observed within the guidance provided on opportunities to engage families in lessons.
Using the CRE ELA scorecards, overall evaluation scores were revealed as a 7 for representation, a 13 for social justice, and a 13 for teacher materials. The representation score of 7 shows emerging awareness. The curriculum likely represents some groups in diverse and dynamic ways, but not all. Some characters are portrayed in culturally and historically accurate ways, while others still depict stereotypes. There is likely little diversity among the curriculum contributors. A social justice score of 13 demonstrates the curriculum is culturally responsive. It is likely humanizing, liberatory, and equity oriented. Instances of centering multiple perspectives are abundant throughout the curriculum. There are clear prompts, activities, and content that connect students' learning to real life issues and actions, and there are many opportunities for teachers to engage cultural responsiveness. The teacher material score of 13 also demonstrates that the curriculum is culturally responsive. There is an abundance of guidance on engaging cultural responsiveness meaningfully throughout the teaching approach, homework, lesson plans, etc. Culturally responsive guidance is clearly marked and presented as essential to effective teaching. Teachers are encouraged to consistently check their own biases and reflect on their practice.
Although there were definite areas of strength in this curriculum regarding diversity and inclusion, there are areas of improvement to note within the curriculum and included texts. In the area of representation, little representation was observed in the LGBTQ+ community. A study completed by California Safe Schools Coalition demonstrated that the inclusion of LGBTQ+ people in instructional materials linked to greater student safety at school and lower rates of bullying, which should be considered when crafting inclusive curriculum. Additionally, the representation of underrepresented groups and people was done so through leaning into stereotypes at times. Inclusion for the purpose of representation should be done carefully to avoid stereotyping groups of people. Stereotypes can also be analyzed through a social justice orientation. According to the Oxford Review, stereotypes should be challenged through an anti-bias curriculum, where prejudicial attitudes are challenged through curriculum to encourage understanding and appreciation of differences. Additionally, many of the sensitive topics presented in the selected text passively introduced or addressed cultural experiences that the student body may be facing in their personal lives. This should be done carefully to not elicit negative emotions while learning for the students that can relate. Teacher materials related to these sensitive topics should be provided to teachers to help students navigate any difficult feelings or conversations that may arise due to the curriculum material. This will aid in active learning rather than passive learning about the experiences some face in other cultures. Teacher material should also offer opportunities to connect with families and the community, as the goal is to relate to their culture and the diversity within the community. Alandis 2024 offers suggestions for involving parents and community members to avoid cultural bias in curriculum and learning, such as collaboration through group discussions and community engagement events.